In an era where being queer was vilified, Sapphic actresses had to keep their desires and relationships secret. Here are 15 lesbian and bisexual actresses in old Hollywood you didn't know.
Hello, everybody. This is Mrs. Norman Maine.
Number 15, Janet Gaynor. Born on October 6, 1906, as Laura Gaynor to a modest family in Philadelphia, few could have predicted that Gaynor would rise to become one of Hollywood's greatest silent film stars. After her family relocated to San Francisco, Gaynor completed high school in 1923 before moving to Los Angeles to work at a shoe store for $18 per week. Adjusted to inflation, that is about $327 in 2024. Not too bad for a young girl starting life. However, the lure of Hollywood drew her in, and she soon found herself in minor, uncredited roles in several feature films and comedy shorts. Undeterred by her slow progress, Gaynor's patience never ran out. She kept working and racking up experience from her small roles until she delivered a standout performance in 1926's The Johnstown Flood that caught the eye of studio heads, especially given she was only 20 years old. In the following year, she starred in films like Seventh Heaven, Sunrise, and 1928's Street Angel. 1929, however, the cream of the crop. Gaynor made history by becoming the first woman to ever win an Academy Award for Best Actress, an honor she received for her roles in all three of these films. This made her the only actress in history to ever win an Oscar for multiple roles in one year. That said, remember how many stars of the silent era phased out of the industry when talkies took over? Gaynor wasn't having it. Her soft, charming voice made her one of the few actresses to make a smooth transition to sound film, and she continued to be a top box office draw throughout the 1930s. Remember her as Esther Blodgett in 1937's A Star is Born? Of course you do. Gaynor shone like a million stars and earned yet another Oscar nomination, but she lost to Louise Rayner. Despite her immense success in the industry, Gaynor took a step back from acting after The Young in Heart in 1938. Her final film appearance was in the 1957 movie Bernadine, but she made one last return to the stage in the Broadway production of Harold and Maude. Although the play was not a success, her performance stood out as a memorable highlight. Sadly, Gaynor passed away in September 1984 due to complications from pneumonia. Although she died at the age of 77, it hurts that the years leading to her passing were rough. She was seriously injured in a cab accident in 1982 that claimed the life of acting agent Ben Washer. Also injured were her husband, executive producer Paul Gregory, and actress Mary Martin. Gaynor had 11 broken ribs, a broken collarbone, a ruptured bladder, multiple pelvic fractures, and even a bleeding kidney. She went through a series of painful operations and was increasingly weak until her death. Although Gaynor married 3 times and had a child, there were multiple rumors at the time that Gaynor had relationships with women, including fellow co-stars Margaret Livingston and Mary Martin, the latter of whom was in the same car that had an accident. Besides, her second husband, Adrian, was a costume designer for MGM and openly gay within the film community. Agreeing to a lavender marriage with a bisexual Gaynor would have been a no-brainer. Number 14, Marie Dressler. Marie Dressler may not be one of the most recognizable faces in contemporary times, but boy was she that girl in her heyday. Born Layla Marie Korber on the 9th of November 1868, Dressler was thrust into the industry at a young age. By 14, she had already joined a theater group and was fast building a career that would take her from the stage to the silver screen, a pipe dream for most women in that era. By 1982, she was already on Broadway and had become a star comedienne on the vaudeville circuit. But alas, her journey to stardom was anything but a bed of roses. It's one of talent, patience, and perseverance. You see, back in 1914, Dressler starred in Tilly's Punctured Romance, which featured a young, more promising Charlie Chaplin. But despite his rising fame, Dressler actually took top billing in the film. Her performance was inch perfect and really put her career on the map, but it collapsed as soon as it started. By 1918, she was basically blacklisted from both film and stage after participating in the Chorus Girls strike of 1917. This completely devastated Dressler's career, leaving her unemployed and in near poverty. For nearly a decade, she was largely forgotten and slipped into obscurity. But hey, you know what they say, there's light at the end of every tunnel. In 1927, at the age of 59, Dressler made an epic comeback. With the help of MGM screenwriter Frances Marion, Dressler was able to score roles in The Joy Girl and The Callahans and the Murphys, the latter of which was later withdrawn due to objections from Irish-American groups. With Dressler's talent back in the discussions, she was able to get better roles that truly etched her back in the spotlight. Remember her performance in 1930's Anna Christie alongside Greta Garbo? Chef's Kiss. She also starred in Min and Bill that same year, earning her an Academy Award for Best Actress. Coming back to a decade dominated by iconic stars like Jean Harlow, Greta Garbo, and Joan Crawford, anyone would have struggled to find footing. But Dressler isn't everyone. Her every woman appeal and impeccable comedic timing made her a top box office draw. She even won the prestigious Exhibitors Poll as the most popular actress for 3 consecutive years, a remarkable achievement in an era where young glam stars were the order of the day. By the time she made her later roles in Dinner at 8 and Emma, for which she received another Oscar nomination, no one could deny her versatility as an actress. Sadly, she passed away from cancer 2 years later in 1934, aged 65. But while Dressler's professional achievements and late comeback were well documented, her personal life, especially her relationships, left a lot open for debate. Following the death of her close companion Jim Dalton, Dressler found solace in the company of women. She formed an intimate relationship with actress Claire Dubray, which many speculated was romantic in nature. To be fair, it would have made a lot of sense. Dressler was known to be a private person, and she already suffered from public scrutiny in the past. At a time when open lesbian relationships were taboo, especially for someone of Dressler's stature, her career risked imploding once again. Secrecy was better than poverty. Speaking of which, here's another woman with a rather topsy-turvy walk to stardom.
Why don't you climb down from that step ladder of respectability and look at people at eye level? You might like them.
Really? Has it come to this? When a decent married woman must stand in her own living room and be insulted by a woman of your type. Ow!
Number 13, Carol Landis. Born in 1919 in Fairchild, Wisconsin, Carol Landis came right in time to be a star in the golden age of Hollywood. But her life was marked by constant highs and lows. Her father, a railroad mechanic, left the family when she was young, leaving Landis's mother to raise her and her siblings alone. She then married young to reduce the load, though it was annulled a month later. In 1936, Landis moved to Hollywood to pursue her dream of becoming an actress. But like many young hopefuls, her early years were spent in minor roles, often as a chorus girl in Warner Brothers films. Her big break came in 1940, when she was cast as Luana in 1 Million BC. The role, which had her dressed in a revealing costume, got her the attention she craved, though much of it focused on her physical appearance rather than her talent. Sadly, this was a recurring theme in her career, as critics often focused on her beauty while underestimating her comedic and dramatic abilities. Much of her subsequent work was even shoved into B films or as a supporting actress in A films. Unperturbed, Landis made do with whatever she was given until 1942, when she finally scored hit features in films like Manila Calling and The Powers Girl. However, the attention she received never translated into long-term stardom. Landis's beauty once again overshadowed her acting abilities in the eyes of Hollywood executives. And despite having made 49 films by the end of her career, the more substantial career-defining roles always seemed to elude her. Plus, her life was equally turbulent. She married and divorced several times, including unions with Willis Hunt Jr., Thomas Wallace, and Horace Schmidlap. Though she worked steadily and appeared in films such as I Wake Up Screaming, she was never able to shake off the shackles of being just another pretty face in Hollywood. Soon, her mental and physical health began to spiral. She would later overdose on drugs in her Brentwood Heights home at the age of 29. Looking back, it's hard not to feel like Landis was let down. If Hollywood gave her enough roles to showcase her talent, who knows what she might have accomplished? Or could it have been a punishment for being bisexual? In 1945, which was around the time her career suddenly declined, rumors of a relationship between Landis and novelist Jacqueline Suzanne went rife. It wouldn't be far-fetched to assume studio executives felt the need to cripple her wings after that, but we may never know. Number 12, Lilan Tashman. Known as one of Hollywood's leading clothes horses, Lilan Tashman was one of the most emphatic fashion icons during the early 1930s. And guess what? She wasn't just following trends like the average Joe, she was creating them. She was praised for her knack of dressing ahead of the curve and donning bold and glamorous outfits that made her the envy of many. Even her fellow students wished they could afford clothes like hers or even wear them so well. Would you blame them? Tashman's wardrobe was a spectacle of high-end fashion, filled with luxurious fabrics and daring designs that earned her the title of Hollywood's best-dressed woman on the screen. But beyond her fashion fame, Tashman was a pretty good actress. After dabbling in stage work for a while, Lilan Tashman made her film debut in 1921's Experience, followed by Head Over Heels a year later. She didn't receive any offers in 1923, but her persistence in visiting casting offices paid off. She appeared in 6 films in 1924, and for a period, even averaged 7 films per year. And just like Janet Gaynor, Tashman was one of the few actors who transitioned smoothly into the sound era without much fuss. But while she kept her fame in the new era, Tashman's personal life was equally sensational. Her fierce personality led to reported physical altercations with fellow actresses like Lupe Velez, Constance Bennett, and Alona Marlowe, whom she hit in 1931 after catching her in husband Edmund Lowe's dressing room. Beyond that, rumors swirled around her alleged relationships with some of Hollywood's most iconic stars, including Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, and Kay Francis. While none of these relationships were ever confirmed by the actress, her name was always close to the private lives of glamorous women. Sadly, Tashman passed away in 1934 under mysterious circumstances after entering a New York hospital for a tumor removal. She was just 37 years old at the time. But while one might assume that her demise signaled the conclusion of her story, several intriguing twists would soon unfold. You see, Tashman left behind approximately $31,000 in cash and $121,000 in furs and jewels, but had not thought to leave a will. After all, she never assumed her not-so-complex operation would be her end. This oversight led to years of legal disputes between her husband, Edmund Lowe, and her 2 surviving sisters, Hattie and Jenny. Number 11, Eva LaGallienne. Was there any doubt that Eva LaGallienne was going to be a force to be reckoned with in the theater? Born in London in 1899 to a poet and a journalist, she was practically destined for the stage. However, after her parents separated, Eva moved to Paris with her mother, where she discovered her passion for performing. Legends say she encountered the legendary Sarah Bernhardt doing her thing, a moment that ignited her burning desire to become a star in theater. With her incredible talent, Eva quickly established herself as a prominent actress, director, and playwright with a knack for delivering powerful performances in whatever craft she was playing with. However, amid her many accomplishments in the industry, Eva's personal life was so often scrutinized. Unlike the women we've talked about so far who preferred to keep their Sapphic desires secret in a bid to save their careers or keep them off spiteful eyes, Eva lived her life openly, leaving little to guess, especially her love life. Being bold and brave, her romantic escapades became the talk of the town. She had notable relationships with influential women, including the actress Alla Nazimova and the wealthy heiress Alice de Lamar, who not only stole Eva's heart, but also funded her theater company and artistic ventures. However, the most talked about affair was easily with the married actress Josephine Hutchinson. Why, you ask? Well, let's just say that their passions for their relationship were matched by their controversies. On the one hand, Josephine was deeply in love, while Eva preferred her independence. When Eva met another actress, Marian Evenson, things got complicated. The trio began living together, but Hutchinson felt increasingly sidelined. Eventually, the love triangle took its toll, leading Josephine to end their tumultuous relationship. And as you'd probably expect, the press wasted no time vilifying Eva when they caught wind of the scandal. She became the scapegoat for Hutchinson's heartbreak, and the backlash was fierce. The negative publicity haunted Eva throughout her life, leaving her feeling ambivalent about her identity. She felt deep regret over her romantic choices in her later years, to the point where she warned others about the emotional toll of being openly queer in a hostile society. In her words, "If you have any thoughts about being a lesbian, don't do it. Your life will be nothing but tragedy." But hey, it wasn't always doom and gloom though. She had fun making her Sapphic adventures, and the same goes for our next woman.
He asked me a lot of questions, mostly about you.
About me?
About you and me.
Yeah?
He kept asking me if I knew why you came here. He asked me that a couple of times.
What else?
Oh, a lot of questions.
Number 10, Lizabeth Scott. It's difficult to explain Lizabeth Scott's career to more contemporary film viewers. The American actress, singer, and model for the Walter Thornton Model Agency was hailed for being the most beautiful face of film noir during the 1940s and 1950s. Yet many referred to her as the poor man's Lauren Bacall. Known for having a smoky voice and a sultry blonde bombshell appeal like the legendary Bacall herself, Scott never really shook off the harsh, never-ending comparisons during her heyday. She was much more than a cheaper version of someone else. She was unique, graceful, and better than her film noir counterparts. After serving as an understudy for the role of Sabina in the original Broadway and Boston productions of The Skin of Our Teeth, Scott went on to star in 40s film classics like The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, Dead Reckoning, Desert Fury, and Too Late for Tears. And if you still need convincing, did you know that out of her 22 films, she played the lead role in all but 3? Besides her work on stage and radio, she also made television appearances from the late 1940s until the early 1970s. However, although the public response to Scott was largely positive during her time in Paramount, critics were less convinced. As said earlier, they made harsh comparisons to prior legends like Lauren Bacall and Tallulah Bankhead. Harsh critics like Bosley Crowther of the New York Times gave damaging reviews of her performance in You Came Along, and Bob Thomas said her throaty voice makes Lauren Bacall sound like a mezzo-soprano. And this brings us to her acting style. Like so many film actors during the 1940s, Scott had a cool, naturalistic approach influenced by various sources. However, critics often looked down on her subtle style, favoring the more dramatic techniques of earlier stage performances. Thankfully for her, though, others saw things in a different light. With a renewed interest in film noir and its associated acting style that began in the 1980s, Scott's reputation improved significantly among critics and film historians. Alas, her acting style wasn't the only thing making her infamous. In September 1954, Confidential magazine ran a front-page story alleging that Scott was a lesbian, claiming she was associated with the little black books kept by Hollywood courtesans. The article also suggested that during a trip to Paris, she had become involved with Freda, one of the city's most infamous lesbian entertainers. Although Scott instituted a $2.5 million suit against the magazine, she lost on a technicality and was never able to recover from the stain on her reputation. Additionally, Scott had a defiant attitude. She never conformed to the expectations of Hollywood's elite or shown deference to powerful gossip columnists like Luella Parsons and Hetty Hopper. The tabloid was simply the final nail in the coffin. Her career never truly recovered, but she wasn't impoverished. She invested her money well and lived rather comfortably until she passed away from congestive heart failure at the age of 92 in 2015. She has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1624 Vine Street in Hollywood. Up next is Mrs. Hotshot herself.
So Romeo would, were he not Romeo cold, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that type.
Number 9, Katherine Hepburn. With her bold personality, unconventional style, and extraordinary talent, Katherine Hepburn was one woman that Hollywood just couldn't silence. Born in 1907 to a progressive, well-to-do family, Hepburn was never one to shy away from breaking the rules. She even wore trousers in a time when society expected a woman to dress more conservatively. But she wasn't just pushing boundaries in fashion. Her love life was equally as audacious. Remember her famous relationship with Spencer Tracy? Of course you do. It was a 26-year-long connection that resulted in 9 films together. It was steamy, beautiful, and simply unforgettable. Not even Tracy's devout Catholic beliefs could separate the pair. He never divorced his wife, and Hepburn herself remained with him until his death in 1967. Till date, their love story is hailed as one of the most iconic Hollywood romances, but not just spanning 3 decades. No sir, there's much more beneath the surface, especially concerning Hepburn's bisexuality. You see, while her relationship with Tracy was highly publicized, it's been suggested that Hepburn had numerous clandestine relationships with women behind the scenes, including writer Nancy Hamilton and actress Frances Rich. But hey, we've barely touched the surface. The most shocking revelations came from Scotty Bowers, a Hollywood insider who claimed that Hepburn's relationship with Tracy was largely a cover to conceal her real romantic inclinations. According to Bowers, Hepburn preferred women and had several relationships with women over the years. Her marriage with Tracy was basically a hoax, a lavender marriage of the sorts. And guess what? Hollywood screenwriter Larry Kramer went even further. He suggested that both Hepburn and Tracy were gay and that their relationship was a carefully constructed studio narrative designed to protect both actors from public scrutiny. Shocking, right? The plot thickens. While Hepburn never addressed these rumors directly, it's worth adding that she and Bowers allegedly became inseparable over the course of 5 decades. With such fondness, it's hard to imagine that the author would lie that he procured over 150 different women for the 4-time Oscar winner. Worse yet, he even suggested that Hepburn was rather fickle and would only see each woman once or twice before getting bored of them. However, Hepburn was said to have become infatuated with a young girl named Barbara. The duo was said to have maintained contact for 49 years, even going so far as to gift her a brand new 2-tone Ford Fairlane. Some reports also state that Barbara received a letter from Hepburn's attorneys just 3 months before the actress passed away in June 2003, which supposedly contained a $100,000 check. In any case, I find Hepburn's story to be quite interesting. Despite being seen as an independent and progressive woman, unafraid of breaking rules, she was still constrained by societal pressures to an extent. But while we're on the subject of Katherine Hepburn, can you guess who we've got next? Number 8, Frances Rich. Ah yes, Frances Rich, one of Katherine Hepburn's alleged Sapphic relations. Born on the 9th of January 1910, Frances Rich had a short-lived career that spanned only a few years in the early 1930s before she shifted her focus to sculpture, where she became much more renowned. However, she racked up notable appearances in films like 1932's The 13th Guest, Unholy Love, and Zoo in Budapest in 1933. She also appeared on Broadway in Brief Moment from November 1931 through February 1932. If she had kept up acting, she might have become a super successful actress. After all, being a thespian was in her DNA. Her mother was none other than silent screen actress Irene Frances Luther Rich. Alas, Frances preferred sculpting. She created works commissioned by universities and churches, and garnered notable recognition for her contributions to the arts. Some of her notable works include portrait busts at Smith College, the Army-Navy Nurse Monument in Arlington National Cemetery, and a bronze pelican at the University of California, Berkeley. She also created a marble bust of Alice Stone Blackwell for the Boston Public Library, and portrait busts of figures like Lotte Lehmann, Margaret Sanger, and Diego Rivera. Yes, the woman she allegedly was in sexual relationships with. Legend says that Katherine Hepburn met Frances Rich through Jack Ford. Frances also apparently made some witty remarks about Ford's with Hepburn. The rest, as they say, became history. Kate became captivated by Frances and became quite close with her despite never elaborating on the nature of their relationship. The best we could decipher about their relationship came from Frances's friends, who remembered the affection with which she spoke about her travels with Kate. Hepburn's own anecdotes also reveal her deep fondness for sitting on a stool while Franz sculpted half a dozen likenesses of her over the years. At times, their attention was doubled when Frances Rich would invite their mutual friend Robert McKnight, Hepburn's former beau, to bring over his hammer and chisel as well. Frances Rich passed away in 2007, 4 years after Katherine Hepburn.
Are you grouchy? Are you tired? Well, let Vibrato fix you up. Vibrato. V-I-B-R-A-T-O. That's it.
Number 7. Patsy Kelly. Born in January 1910 in New York, Patsy Kelly may not be a household name today, but she was a force to be reckoned with during her heyday. Starting her career in vaudeville at just 12 years old, she quickly made a name for herself, performing alongside prominent comedians like Frank Fay and starring in various Broadway productions. While she never achieved the A-list status many believed she deserved, her contributions to Hollywood in the 1930s were undeniable, with memorable roles in films like Pigskin Parade, Merrily We Live, and Topper Returns. Personally, one of the things that set Kelly apart in the industry was her bold approach to life and life. Dozens of stars in the industry hid their queerness, but not Patsy. It was an open secret within Hollywood circles, and she never cared about the consequences of going against what was expected of her. She frequented lesbian bars and clubs, donned pants instead of dresses, and was often surrounded by what she referred to as mannish women. Yes, Kelly was unapologetically herself. She explicitly talked about her Sapphic desires and told magazines that she was a dyke living with her girlfriend and never planned on marriage. Among her rumored romantic entanglements was a relationship with Tallulah Bankhead, who was also very open about her attraction to both men and women. Serving as Bankhead's assistant, Kelly toured nightclub circuits together and basked in the limelight that came with their association. In retrospect, Kelly said she enjoyed her relationship with Bankhead for many years, despite the fact it was mostly on and off, depending on Tallulah's mood. However, the 1940s weren't so kind to Patsy. She struggled with alcoholism, became increasingly erratic, and clashed with studio executives. It was so bad that Jack Warner, the chairman of Warner Brothers, had to confront Patsy regarding her drinking and sexual orientation. When she refused to comply, he had her blacklisted, effectively ending her Hollywood career. With doors closed in Los Angeles, Patsy returned to New York, where she rekindled her friendship with Bankhead, spending her final years in the company of someone who understood her struggles. She passed away in September 1981 after battling cancer. But while she may not have garnered the fame she deserved during her lifetime, she has a cult following in the classic movie community and is one of the most used examples of celebrities who were openly queer in old Hollywood. Speaking of bold queer celebrities, look who we've got next. Number 6. Gladis Bentley. Although Gladis Bentley wasn't exactly a typical actress, many would have hoped that they were as flamboyant and as audacious as her. She was a standout performer during the Harlem Renaissance and graced the stage at Harry Hansberry's Clam House, one of the most notorious gay speakeasies in New York City. She even headlined at the Ubangi Club, where she was accompanied by a troupe of drag queens. Can you imagine doing all that as a black woman in an era where homophobia and segregation ran rampant? Bentley was basically a walking, breathing, one-woman revolution in pants. Born in Philadelphia as the eldest of 4 children, Bentley faced a tumultuous upbringing. Her family was less than supportive of her differences, particularly her mother, who longed for a son. In fact, her mother refused to touch her as a baby, leaving Bentley to be nurtured by her grandmother. Growing up, Bentley felt an intense disconnect, struggling with her identity while also developing crushes on women and rejecting traditional femininity. But like all of that wasn't already hard enough, Bentley was seen as a broken clock that needed fixing. Her family saw her behavior as abnormal and took her to so many doctors to fix her. However, this only alienated her more and fueled her resolve to be different, to stand tall against normative culture. She eventually ran away from home at just 16 and took refuge in New York City, where she would ultimately thrive. Once in the vibrant, bursting atmosphere of the city, Bentley became a fixture in hotspots like the Clam House and Ubangi Club, where she happily dressed in sharp tuxedos and top hats, openly singing about her queer relationships. Alas, her success would eventually wane as the Harlem speakers fell out of favor with the repeal of Prohibition. She also struggled to recapture the glory of her earlier days at Southern California's gay nightclubs. As societal norms shifted and federal regulations evolved, she faced increasing harassment and was required to obtain special permits to perform in men's clothing. Sadly, Bentley's life was cut short when she passed away unexpectedly from a brief illness on January 18, 1960, at the age of 52. At first, her illness was thought to be caused by the Asian flu, but it was later confirmed to be pneumonia. At the time of her death, she was deeply involved with her church, having been ordained as a minister, albeit without the official paperwork to back it up. She also identified her sexual orientation as straight before her passing. While Bentley's life was undoubtedly filled with struggles, she was undoubtedly a talented performer and an inspirational figure for both the LGBTQ+ community and African Americans.
He never gave me a tumble, even though I flirted with him more than a nice girl should.
And what's that got to do with Donnie?
Let's see. Must be some connection.
Number 5. Ruby Dandridge. Although not as well known as her daughter, Dorothy Dandridge, Ruby was an American actress with a lasting career from the early 1900s through the late 1950s. You might recognize her for her roles on the radio program Amos and Andy, where she portrayed Sadie Blake and Harriet Crawford, as well as on the Judy Canova Show, playing Geranium. She also had uncredited appearances in major films like King Kong, Cabin in the Sky, Dead Reckoning, and The War Against Mrs. Hadley. One of the things that made Ruby Dandridge stand out was her distinctively high-pitched voice, which, yes, became even higher when she was excited. Who would have thought? Her voice proved to be an asset in her acting career across movies, radio, and television. While portraying comic and befuddled maids, all she had to do was speak, and audiences would burst into laughter. But don't take this to mean that Ruby was absent-minded or solely comical in person, because in reality, she was far from it. She was a strategist and a survivor with a keen, calculating intellect. She was also hailed for having an innate ability to quickly assess people and situations, using that insight to manipulate them to her advantage. Her personal life, though? A never-ending drama. Ruby married Cyril Dandridge in 1919, but their marriage was unhappy. They lived with his mother, and he struggled to find stable work to support them. Less than 2 years after their marriage, they welcomed their first daughter, Vivian. But her arrival neither improved their relationship nor eased the tensions at home. She would later leave Cyril, but come back shortly after he convinced her to start over. However, 5 months into her second pregnancy for Dorothy Dandridge, she chose to leave him again, this time for good. After officially getting divorced, Ruby Dandridge opened more to her Sapphic desires. She had a lesbian relationship with a woman named Geneva Williams, who managed Ruby's home and children. But sadly, while preparing the children for a career in show business, Geneva made a habit of pushing them too hard and imposed strict punishments. And the worst part was that Ruby became indifferent. She didn't pay much attention to the harsh treatment her children faced at the hands of Geneva Williams. Alas, on the 17th of October, 1987, Ruby suffered from a fatal heart attack at a nursing home in Los Angeles, California, marking the end to one of the more polarizing actresses in the classic era. But before we go into Hollywood's next Sapphic affair, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications. It only takes a second, and you'll constantly be in the know whenever we go another epic rundown through Hollywood history. Done that already? Alright then, can you guess who's next? Here's a hint. She was the scariest woman in the industry. Number 4. Hope Emerson. Come on now, you didn't think we were going to make a list of old queer Hollywood actresses without talking about Hope Emerson, did you? With a career that spanned vaudeville, Broadway, and film, Hope is easily one of the most versatile actresses of all time. Plus, she basically carved a niche from nothing. She owned scary roles at times when female characters were often relegated to mere love interest or sidekicks. Equally impressive, though, is the fact that she started her career so early. At just 3 years old, Hope Emerson was already acting alongside her mother and displaying her musical talent on the piano. Enter the 1930s, and she featured on Broadway, taking on the role of the Amazon Spartan Lampito in Lysistrata. Not that we're surprised, though. She stood at an imposing 6'2" and weighed around 230 pounds. She was basically Amazonian herself. Unlike her contemporaries, who often played delicate roles, Emerson thrived in parts that capitalized on her intimidating physicality. From her memorable performance as a circus strongwoman in Adam's Rib, to her portrayal as the sadistic matron in Caged, Hope Emerson soon became the go-to actress for villainy roles, which she wholeheartedly accepted. Remember her surreal performance in Caged? Her chilling demeanor and commanding performance captured the complexity of her character and set a new standard for women's prison films. No wonder she earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Don't get me wrong, though. Women appeared in prison films long before John Cromwell's Caged in 1950, but very few, if any, have received Academy Award nominations either before or after. Caged itself earned 3 nominations, including one for its screenplay. Previously, complex roles of the like would have been portrayed one-dimensionally. Her nuanced feature was not only enthralling, but also refreshing. Alas, despite having a rather dominating on-screen persona, Hope Emerson's private life was largely under wraps. She never married or had children and chose to keep her personal affairs far away from the public eye. In any case, her secrecy and androgynous appearance raised countless questions about her sexuality. Many people, even in Hollywood, believed she was queer, but Hope never spoke about it, at least in public. Sadly, she died before spilling the beans. She suffered from a liver ailment that eventually took her life on the 24th of April, 1960. She was 62 at the time. She was laid to rest near her parents in her hometown. Number 3. Pepe Letterer. Born into a theatrical family in 1910, Pepe Letterer is one of those second-generation actresses who just seemed destined for greatness in Hollywood. As the daughter of Broadway producer George Letterer and actress Rain Davies, her life was entwined with show business from the start. And guess what? Her aunt was Marion Davies. Yes, the Marion Davies. Both of these people, especially the latter, played a significant role in Pepe's life. But while the stage seemed like the more obvious path for Pepe, fate apparently had other plans. You see, Marion's mother struggled with the demons of alcoholism. This rocked Pepe's childhood and caused early turbulence until Marion Davies took both Pepe and her brother Charles into a safer clime. At the time, Marion was the mistress of media mogul William Randolph Hearst, so Pepe graced the luxurious Hearst Castle, famed for being one of the most outlandish homes of Hollywood. Despite this, Pepe paid little attention to her new settlement. Rather than playing with dolls in the corner, she delighted in playing pranks on guests at the castle, famously swiping wigs and creating gossip that made its way into Hollywood's news columns. Could it have been a way to mask the struggles of her sexuality? We'll leave you to decide. However, note that in the 1920s and 30s, Hollywood wasn't a welcoming place for openly queer figures, especially women. It took a while, but Pepe finally lived her truth in the open. She fell into several romantic relationships with women, including actress Nina Mae McKinney, which caused outrage in her social circle due to the latter's race and the visibility of their relationship. After Marion Davies and Hearst found out, Pepe was exiled from Hollywood and sent to New York. There, her life spiraled further into addiction. She became involved with actress Alma Rubens, and the two shared not only a romantic connection, but also a devastating addiction to heroin and morphine. Rubens' death in 1931 left Pepe adrift, and her own substance abuse continued to worsen. 4 years later, Pepe would eventually meet her boyfriend at the age of 25. She was committed to a psychiatric ward by Hearst, either due to her addictions or her sexuality, perhaps both. Within a month, she was involved in a nasty accident that culminated with her falling off a hospital window. While initial reports labeled the event as a deliberate act by Pepe, Hearst's media machine spun the story, suggesting it was an accident caused by a nervous breakdown from overstudy. Number 2. Grace Darman. Would it be far-fetched to say Grace Darman is easily one of the most underrated names during Hollywood's silent era? With the talent she had in her arsenal, she could have been a household name, but fate was never really on her side. Yes, her career spanned over a decade, but she was often used in supporting roles alongside more prominent stars. You may remember her in notable appearances like Below the Surface and A Dangerous Adventure, both in 1920, and also The Hope Diamond Mystery, where she shared the screen with Boris Karloff in 1921. But despite racking up those impressive performances in quick succession, she was unable to become a leading woman in major films. Her personal life, though? Much more in the open. Within Hollywood's LGBT community, Darman was famously involved with Gene Acker in a steamy connection that would eventually become one of old Hollywood's juiciest scandals. You see, while she and Gene met in 1918, the pair became lovers shortly after. A few months later, Acker met the then unknown actor Valentino at a party hosted by Nazimova and, well, hit things off. They began dating and married in 1919, but get this. On their wedding night, Acker left Valentino stranded and went straight to Darman, confessing her love for her. Their marriage was never consummated, and Acker filed for separation in 1921. Darman and Acker remained lovers through most of the 1920s. Shocking, right? Well, that's just one story. Beyond her relationship with Acker, Darman was part of an influential and underground queer community. She frequently attended gatherings at actress Alla Nassimova's infamous garden, where she had steamy Sapphic relations. There were also rumors suggesting a romantic entanglement of sorts between Darman and Nassimova. But there has been no solid evidence to support this. Both parties also never confirmed it. Still, Darman's connection to the like of Nassimova kept her within a tight-knit circle of women juggling both their careers and same-sex relationships in a hostile era. Looking back at the slope of Darman's career, it's easy to point fingers at the scandals and speculations, but the real reason why she didn't have longevity in the industry boils down to the arrival of sound in cinema. Like many silent film actors, Darman struggled to transition into the talkies. Her final notable role came in 1927's Wide Open, after which she faded from the public eye, spending the rest of her life out of the limelight. She passed away silently in 1963. This brings us to the final woman on our list. Though she was pretty famous for having Sapphic relationships, I bet you never knew the juicy secrets she kept within them.
Good.
Number 1. Marlene Dietrich. If you go weak at the knees at the sight of a woman in a suit, chances are that you have Marlene Dietrich to thank for it. As a product of the arts-centric Weimar culture in the early 20th century Germany, Marlene Dietrich lived freely and fearlessly and was well known for her sexuality. Look no further than her epic dress sense and masculine style. She challenged the fashion norms of the time by wearing pants and tuxedos on screen, forever changing women's views on the matter. Unafraid of the consequences of being queer, she was also open about her attraction to both men and women and was said to lock lips with Kay Francis, Edith Piaf, Mercedes de Acosta, and even Greta Garbo. Over the course of her lengthy career, which stretched from the 1910s to the 1980s, Dietrich constantly reinvented herself. She started in silent films and gained international fame with her role in 1930's The Blue Angel, one of the most influential sound films of its time, which marked the beginning of her long partnership with renowned director Joseph von Sternberg. Afterwards, she signed a contract with Paramount, making her one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood during that period. Though she appeared in only a few films from the 50s through the 70s, Dietrich spent most of that time touring the world as a famous live cabaret performer. She made a habit of beginning her live shows in glamorous gowns and then doing the second part in well-fitted tuxedos, singing songs that were more often performed by men. And guess what? While she was living in Berlin, she enjoyed visiting gay bars and drag balls. When she made it to Hollywood, she became part of the sewing circle, a phrase used to describe a clandestine group of lesbian and bi actresses in Hollywood. In a 1992 tell-all book, Marlene Dietrich's daughter, Maria Riva, revealed more about her mother's complex sexuality despite being married to film producer Rudolf Seiber. In the book, Riva shared that her mother's affairs with men were more about control and manipulation than genuine enjoyment. In contrast, her relationships with women were said to be far more fulfilling. Despite this, many historians are reluctant to label Dietrich as bisexual. Film critic Kenneth Tynan, for one, commented that Dietrich's romantic nature wasn't confined to any particular gender. But while we end our journey through the unknown lives of 15 real lesbian and bisexual actresses in old Hollywood, the story doesn't end here. Be sure to like, subscribe, and check out the video currently displaying on your screen. You don't want to miss it.